I still remember the first day I laid eyes on Danvers Ridge. My wife, Jillian, and I drove past the sign, large, stylishly carved wooden letters reading "Welcome to Danvers Ridge," and onto a winding main road flanked by manicured lawns. The houses here were all softly hued, spaced evenly along wide streets lined with elm trees. We were drawn to the neighborhood's serenity and the promise of a close-knit community after years of city living. I never imagined it would become the site of one of the strangest, most stressful ordeals I'd ever endure. As for me, I'm Dr. Nathan Ellis. Until recently, most people outside my field didn't know my name. I hold a PhD in meteorological sciences and lead a specialized division under the National Weather Surveillance Agency. In short, I spearhead efforts to coordinate real-time weather monitoring across the country, from local Doppler stations to satellite feeds. It's a job demanding both scientific expertise and bureaucratic finesse, a constant balancing act of innovation, politics, and data integrity. When Jillian and I found the perfect house in Danvers Ridge, I envisioned an escape from that hustle, a tranquil place to settle. But that tranquility proved fleeting. We closed on a craftsman-style home at the far end of Spruce Trail, a cul-de-sac with a scenic view of the rolling hills. From our backyard, we could see a line of smaller ridges in the distance, often touched by morning fog. Days after moving in, we discovered that Danvers Ridge was governed by an HOA, complete with a thick set of bylaws. We were assured it mostly covered lawn standards and architectural uniformity. No big deal, we thought. Everyone told us the HOA was run by a woman named Marjorie Arlton, a middle-aged, formidable figure who took her role very seriously. Neighbors whispered that she was known privately as Karen, using that modern slang for a nosy, entitled person who loves meddling in everyone's business. I first met Marjorie, Karen, on our second day in the house. Jillian and I were in the midst of unpacking boxes, the driveway cluttered with half-emptied cardboard. The doorbell rang. Through the window, I glimpsed a woman with perfectly coiffed hair and a tight-lipped smile. She wore a crisp blouse, a pastel sweater draped over her shoulders in a style reminiscent of country club fashion. "Good afternoon," she said. "I'm Marjorie Arlton, president of the Danvers Ridge Homeowners Association." Her voice carried both politeness and underlying authority, as though she were announcing, "And you will answer to me for the rest of your life." "Nice to meet you," I replied, extending a hand. "I'm Nathan Ellis. My wife, Jillian, is inside." She nodded briskly, then offered me a thick folder containing HOA guidelines. Pages upon pages about mailbox heights, fence styles, even acceptable colors for front doors. "We maintain a harmonious aesthetic," she explained, scanning my yard with the wariness of a hawk. "I trust you'll follow each regulation carefully." I promised we would. She gave a curt nod and departed. There wasn't anything overtly offensive in her manner, but something about her watchful eyes unsettled me. If I'd known then how deeply she'd interfere in my life, I would have slammed the door and fled. Yet at the time, I just shrugged it off as part of suburban living. Within days, minor irritations arose. A neighbor warned me that Marjorie was fining people for leaving trash bins on the curb 5 minutes past the allowed time. Another told me she once measured the grass in someone's yard, threatening to impose a lien unless it matched HOA specifications. Still, these were petty annoyances, not enough to overshadow the charm of Danvers Ridge. Jillian and I laughed them off, not realizing that Marjorie's obsession with order would soon spiral into a near-catastrophic situation. And so, our new life in Danvers Ridge began. I tucked the HOA regulations into a drawer, believing we'd just do our best to keep our head down and avoid trouble. After all, how much could one meddlesome neighbor possibly interfere? I was about to find out. Unbeknownst to most residents, Danvers Ridge was perched in a spot of particular interest to meteorologists. The hills around us formed a natural vantage point for a small but powerful Doppler radar system. Part of a regional weather monitoring network, the installation was hidden behind an unmarked fence on a raised clearing a half-mile from the main houses. I knew about it, of course, from my job. Since I supervised the entire region's weather surveillance, I was thrilled that my new home happened to sit near an essential node in our detection chain. On weekends, I sometimes hiked the wooded trails behind our neighborhood. One morning, I ventured up the main path and reached that clearing. There, behind a chain-link fence, stood the tall radar tower, crowned by a white spherical dome. In the hush of the morning, it looked almost futuristic, scanning the skies for precipitation, wind patterns, and atmospheric changes. I'd visited plenty of these sites across the country, but never on foot from my own backyard. Strange to think that my professional domain was so close to where I now lived. I found out that a small team of technicians from the NOAA branch office, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, oversaw routine maintenance. They visited monthly, ensuring the tower's calibration and mechanical systems were in top shape. Most of Danvers Ridge's residents probably knew something about that weather station, but from the glimpses I'd gleaned, they didn't pay it much attention. It was rarely discussed, just a piece of local infrastructure. Marjorie, however, had taken an interest. One day, as I was talking to a neighbor about the radar tower, Marjorie emerged from behind a hedge, wearing gardening gloves. She seemed to have overheard us. "That tower is an eyesore," she declared, a note of distaste in her voice. "I've been trying to get the county to remove it for ages." She cast me a sharp look. "Are you sure it's necessary?" "As a matter of fact, it is," I said lightly, not wanting to start an argument. "It's part of our region's severe weather early warning system." She snorted. "All it does is pollute our skyline and hum at odd hours. Plus, who knows what sort of radiation or beams it emits. I heard from one of the older residents that it's messing with television signals. We want Danvers Ridge to remain peaceful, not cluttered with government hardware." I tried to explain that Doppler radar was safe, thoroughly regulated, and crucial for real-time data that could save lives, especially in storm-prone states. But Marjorie waved off my words. "I've been in contact with the local commissioner," she said. "We're exploring options. The HOA deserves a say." Her words triggered a pang of concern. Although I had the ear of certain NOAA administrators, local politics could still hamper or delay expansions of the weather network. I never imagined the tower might face removal. But if the local HOA president was leading a crusade, it could complicate matters. My attempts at reassurance bounced right off her. She seemed to have already made up her mind. "Trust me," I said, forcing a diplomatic tone. "This tower is a net positive. It helps track storms with advanced lead time." She raised an eyebrow. "Perhaps. Or perhaps it's a relic we don't need. Time will tell." With that, she strolled away, leaving me uneasy. But again, I tried to rationalize. Surely she can't sabotage a government installation, right? That thought would haunt me soon enough. It was at the next monthly HOA meeting that things escalated. Jillian and I attended partly out of curiosity, partly to meet other neighbors. The meeting was held in a small rec center near the neighborhood's entrance, with folding chairs lined up before a long table where Marjorie and her small circle of board members presided. A large, laminated poster behind them read, "Keeping Danvers Ridge Beautiful." At first, the agenda covered typical HOA matters: collecting fees, scheduling landscaping days, approving minor architectural requests. I observed Marjorie's tight smile as she politely but firmly shut down a neighbor's request for a slightly taller fence. Then, near the end, Marjorie cleared her throat. "There's another matter of pressing concern," she announced. "The presence of the unsightly and, I dare say, potentially hazardous weather radar tower to the north of Danvers Ridge." Her words stirred a low murmur among the assembled residents. I felt Jillian stiffen beside me. Marjorie pressed on. "While not strictly on our property, the tower is within close proximity. We, as the HOA, have a right to demand safety certifications, noise abatement, and possibly relocation. I've heard from multiple residents who suspect the tower's signals are interfering with electronics or triggering migraines." She made a sympathetic face, scanning the crowd. "Now, we must unite and petition the county or the relevant agencies for a solution." An older gentleman in the front row raised a hand, his voice scratchy. "Are we sure it's the radar causing these problems? I've lived here for 10 years and never noticed any issue. We do get storm warnings faster, right?" "I'd say that's a good thing." Marjorie nodded in mock patience. "Thank you for your input, Mr. Abernathy. But numerous residents have expressed concerns. We mustn't dismiss them. I have calls in with the local commissioner's office. Ultimately, if the tower is found to be detrimental, we can demand it be decommissioned or moved." I stood up. My heart pounded, but I spoke calmly. "I'm Nathan Ellis, a new resident on Spruce Trail. I happen to work in national weather surveillance. This tower is part of a broader system used for early warnings. I can assure everyone that it's well within safety standards. If anything, it's crucial for our region's severe weather alerts. A wave of curiosity flickered across the crowd. I noticed some nodding at my words. Marjorie's lips thinned. "Mr. Ellis, is it?" she said icily. "So you're suggesting the HOA's concerns are invalid?" "No, not at all," I said. "I'm only saying the tower is safe and beneficial. If residents have questions, they can contact NOAA for official data. Shutting it down or relocating it would hamper the area's ability to track storms, tornadoes, flash floods, winter systems, and that could put lives at risk." Marjorie's face flushed slightly, but she maintained composure. "The board has a responsibility to weigh every angle," she said. "You may have a stake in this from your job, which I respect, but the community's welfare is paramount. We'll investigate thoroughly." I wanted to argue further, but Jillian placed a hand on my arm, signaling me to let it go. Over the next half hour, the meeting concluded. Neighbors dispersed in small groups, gossiping about the tower. Some asked me questions. What about noise? Are signals dangerous to kids? I did my best to quell fears, but the seeds of doubt had been sown. As we left, Jillian shot me a worried look. "She's fixated on that tower." "Yes," I agreed. "But hopefully, reason will prevail." I didn't realize just how stubborn or destructive Marjorie's brand of reason could be. Over the following weeks, the matter of the radar tower simmered in the background of Danvers Ridge. I noticed pamphlets appear in mailboxes, titled, "Is the radar tower hurting our community?" crammed with misleading statistics and unverified anecdotes. A neighbor named Clara, who lived across the street, told me she'd caught Marjorie pinning them up on communal notice boards. Clara rolled her eyes. "She's scaring folks with half-truths about radiation exposure and property value drops." Don't get me wrong, I hate the look of that dome, but we never had issues until Marjorie decided to whip people up. One bright Saturday, I bumped into another neighbor, Harold, while mowing my front lawn. He quietly slipped me a flyer he'd received from Marjorie's community oversight group. It alleged that the tower emits harmful microwaves, urging residents to file complaints to the county. "You should see the older folks," Harold muttered. "They're a bit spooked. Some are signing on." At the same time, I was busy at work. As head of a national weather surveillance unit, I juggled countless tasks, reviewing data from storm-prone regions, ensuring local stations were funded, coordinating with NOAA on new technologies. My schedule was hectic, but I still tried to keep tabs on Danvers Ridge. If I'm honest, I underestimated the seriousness of Marjorie's crusade. I assumed she was just a busybody playing politics. The tower belonged to NOAA and was federally recognized. She couldn't truly remove it, or so I believed. On calmer nights, Jillian and I would step onto our back deck, where the silhouettes of the hills caught the last glimmers of twilight. We'd sip tea, breathing in the crisp air. The quietness of Danvers Ridge felt like a gift after years in a crowded city. Sometimes, overhead, I saw the faint blink of the radar beacon from the tower. It usually gave me peace, reminding me that advanced science was humming away, safeguarding the region. At the next HOA meeting, I brought official brochures from NOAA, along with charts demonstrating the tower's safety. Marjorie accepted them with a frozen smile, promising to review them thoroughly. In reality, she barely glanced at them before pivoting the conversation to petty matters like unauthorized garden lights. Yet for a stretch of about a month, no major confrontation occurred. Neighbors went about their business, the radar tower whirred along, and for a moment I hoped the issue might fizzle out. In hindsight, that was simply the lull, one that often comes before the most jarring storms. And a storm was indeed brewing, both literally and figuratively. Early summer brought unpredictable weather patterns. Our region was no stranger to thunderstorms, but meteorologists warned that an especially potent system was brewing hundreds of miles away. My office flagged it as a potential severe outbreak with strong winds, hail, and possible tornado activity. The local news stations began cautioning folks to prepare. At NOAA's request, my team and I traveled to the nearest major weather station for a day, coordinating real-time data. The Danvers Ridge radar tower became a key node for scanning the approach corridor of this storm. Its vantage point among the hills gave us a precious angle on rotating cells. We needed that data to send out timely warnings if funnel clouds formed. Amid these preparations, Marjorie's complaint letters, and those from her band of alarmed neighbors, reached a crescendo. I heard through unofficial channels that the county was holding a hearing to discuss concerns about the tower's presence. This was unusual, to say the least. Typically, for any large-scale change, NOAA or the National Weather Service would be approached well in advance, not blindsided by a local group. But evidently, Marjorie's fear-mongering had some traction with the county commissioners. Returning home, I found a thick envelope in my mailbox with the HOA logo. It was a notice for a special community session on radar issues, featuring line items about health hazards, noise abatement, and alternate solutions. Jillian and I rolled our eyes. Another meeting, another attempt by Marjorie to stir fear. As the storm system neared, I felt an odd tension in the air, like static electricity before a lightning strike. The sky would be bright and calm one moment, then oppressive clouds would roll overhead. My phone buzzed constantly with weather updates. The system was intensifying faster than expected. We'd likely get hammered by heavy rain and damaging gusts within the next 2 or 3 days. That was precisely when everything at Danvers Ridge turned sideways. I had no inkling that Marjorie was about to enact a plan so brazen it still defies belief. On the eve of the storm, Jillian and I settled in for an early night, anticipating long hours at the forecast center the next day. We dozed off around 10 p.m. sometime after midnight. I jolted awake, unsure why. The house was silent except for the hum of the air conditioner. I was about to roll over and return to sleep when I heard a faint thud from outside. Alarmed, I rose and peered out the window. Our street was dark, illuminated by a single lamp near the cul-de-sac. Nothing stirred. I scanned the yard but saw no sign of movement. Possibly just a stray branch falling, I told myself. Still, the unsettled feeling lingered. Eventually, I returned to bed. Come morning, the sun rose behind a haze of thick cloud cover. I sipped coffee, scanning the yard for anything amiss. Nothing. But around 8 a.m., my phone buzzed with a call from Tom Bradley, a NOAA technician who oversaw maintenance at the Danvers Ridge Tower. "Nate, something's off," Tom said, voice grim. "The tower's feed is showing anomalies. We're not getting stable readings from the radar reflectivity channels. Could be hardware failure, but it's suspicious. I'm on my way there now. You free to meet me?" A chill rippled through me. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. I raced to the tower on foot, cutting through the trail behind our subdivision. As I climbed the ridge, I saw Tom standing near the fence, arms folded. He frowned at a locked gate that had been forced open. The padlock lay twisted on the ground. Inside the enclosure, the lower section of the tower's control panel appeared damaged, covers pried off, wires severed in places. My heart sank. This wasn't a random mechanical failure. Someone had deliberately vandalized the radar's critical systems. I crouched to inspect the cut wires. The sabotage looked precise enough that the culprit either had instructions or some technical knowledge. Panels that shielded the main data link were wrenched open, the components battered. "Good God," Tom muttered. "Why sabotage a weather radar?" I didn't need to guess too hard. My mind jumped to Marjorie's vehement opposition. Could she have orchestrated this? Or one of her misguided supporters? The notion that a local homeowner might literally break into a federal installation was insane, but the evidence lay right before me, in the form of torn wires and smashed circuit boards. With the storm system closing in, this was more than property damage. It was a threat to public safety. The Danvers Ridge Tower was integral to forecasting localized intensifications or rotation. If it went offline, we'd have a blind spot. People's lives could be at risk if a twister formed undetected. "We need to notify NOAA security," I told Tom, "and the local authorities. This is a serious federal offense." Tom nodded, already dialing his phone. My own mind churned with anger and disbelief. Sabotaging a radar tower just to remove an eyesore? Or to protest perceived dangers? The consequences could be catastrophic. As we stood there, the wind picked up, rustling the trees. Ominous clouds stretched across the sky. I half expected a roll of thunder at that moment, as though nature itself was voicing disapproval. One thing was clear: we needed the tower operational, fast. By midday, the scene around the radar enclosure buzzed with activity. NOAA security personnel arrived, wearing official blue jackets, and set up caution tape. The local sheriff's deputies joined them, snapping photos and taking statements. Meanwhile, Tom rallied a small team of specialized technicians, who arrived in vans laden with diagnostic gear and replacement parts. They wore grim expressions. Even in the typically calm world of weather monitoring, sabotage on this scale was rare. We discovered that multiple critical circuit boards were destroyed. The cables feeding the tower's rotation motors had been severed. Even if we patched them quickly, it would take hours, if not a full day, to recalibrate and bring the system back online. Under normal conditions, that might be manageable. But we were facing a ticking clock. The storm system was nearing the region, slated to intensify overnight or early the next morning. I helped where I could, though I'm more of a data analyst and manager than a hands-on engineer. Still, I pitched in, passing tools and guiding the crew to any backup components NOAA might keep on site. In the back of my mind, I kept replaying the question, who did this? Authorities methodically gathered evidence. They found footprints in the mud near the fence, likely from at least 2 people. One deputy quietly mentioned that a neighbor had reported seeing headlights on the back road around midnight, but details were fuzzy. No direct proof tied the sabotage to Marjorie or her associates yet, but the timing and context were suspicious. She'd waged a public war against the tower, then boom, it was destroyed just as we needed it most. By late afternoon, the sky had grown darker. Clouds scudded across a silver-gray backdrop, and the humidity felt oppressive. My phone buzzed nonstop with meteorological alerts. Our region was now under a moderate risk for severe thunderstorms and possible tornadoes. If we were to get reliable local data, the tower needed to be up. One of the technicians, Samantha, wiped sweat from her brow. We can bypass the worst of the damage, maybe get partial functionality in a few hours. Full repairs? That might take 2 days. But partial power is better than none. Her plan required rerouting data lines and installing temporary boards from a backup kit. It wouldn't deliver the same resolution as normal, but it might at least restore the scanning function. We urged her on. She and the others worked feverishly with the rhythmic clang of tools, the tang of solder in the air, and frequent checks of diagnostic screens. The NOAA security officers conferred with the sheriff's deputies on the other side of the fence, discussing next steps if the sabotage was traced to an organized group. Around 7 p.m., the wind began to howl, scattered raindrops splattering. We were running out of daylight. The storm front was creeping in. Lightning flashed on the horizon. Our best shot at finishing partial repairs was, ironically, under the threat of the very weather we sought to track. Almost there, Tom assured me as we hovered near a test console. Another hour, maybe 2, and we might have a rudimentary radar feed online. I prayed that would be enough. Because if a tornadic cell formed in that blind spot, the time lost could be measured in lost lives. Night fell, and the storm advanced with startling speed. The region's main weather stations lit up with signs of strong convection. I dashed between the tower's makeshift control center and my phone, checking the broader radar network. We might still glean partial coverage from neighboring counties' radars, but Danvers Ridge's tower was crucial for hyperlocal detection. A NOAA colleague from the state office called, voice tense. "Nate, we just flagged a potential rotating system near your area. The velocity scans from the next closest radar are picking up a signature, but it's borderline. We need confirmation from your tower if possible." "We're almost ready," I responded, glancing at Tom. He flashed me a thumbs up, though sweat beaded on his brow. "We'll do what we can with partial capacity." Rain hammered the roof of the small on-site utility building. Lightning forked overhead, occasionally illuminating the tower in an eerie glow. The technicians pressed on, connecting final cables. At last, a beep signaled partial data flow. A shaky but functional radar screen flickered on a laptop perched on a folding table. Tom let out a triumphant whoop. "We've got some reflectivity coming in." I exhaled, relief flooding me. Even if it wasn't 100%, this might allow us to see a tornado signature forming. We quickly scanned the readout, adjusting parameters to compensate for the missing components. Sure enough, a large storm cell hovered about 35 miles west, swirling ominously. The velocity readouts were fuzzy, but it looked capable of generating funnel clouds. We relayed the intel to the state office. Within minutes, local emergency management set off sirens in certain vulnerable zones. Television and smartphone alerts lit up the region, urging residents to be ready to seek shelter. The system churned onward, dumping torrential rain. The question was, would it spawn a confirmed tornado? During a lull in the chaos, I found myself staring at the sabotage scars on the tower's base. The thought that someone would endanger thousands of people just to remove an eyesore enraged me. If we hadn't discovered the damage in time, the tower might have been offline throughout the storm, leaving the entire area blind. My mind flashed to Marjorie's smug face. She can't possibly have anticipated how serious this could get, I told myself. Or maybe she didn't care. At around 11 p.m., the storm's main core approached Danvers Ridge, bringing wind gusts that rattled the fence and threatened to blow out power lines. Just then, the partial radar feed showed a distinct velocity couplet forming, a strong rotation. We alerted emergency services. Within minutes, local weather bulletins announced a tornado warning for southwestern sections of the county, including edges of Danvers Ridge. People scrambled for shelter. Jillian, at home alone, texted me that she was hunkering down in our basement with a neighbor who'd come seeking safer ground. I prayed the funnel wouldn't actually descend. For half an hour, the tension was unbearable. Then came the all clear. A brief touchdown in a nearby rural area had caused some tree damage, but fortunately no casualties or major property losses. The funnel dissipated before hitting dense neighborhoods. Relief coursed through me. The minimal radar feed we'd restored had made a vital difference, giving us enough time to raise alarms and direct warnings. Still, the sabotage overshadowed any sense of triumph. With the immediate weather threat receding, I turned my thoughts to the next question. Who exactly destroyed this station, and how can we hold them accountable? By dawn, the storm had swept eastward. Debris littered roads, but Danvers Ridge avoided the worst. That morning, local news channels buzzed with stories of near misses. A few miles away, a barn was damaged and power lines lay scattered, but no major catastrophes. On the NOAA side, however, the sabotage overshadowed everything. We had enough evidence to treat it as a federal crime. The FBI was alerted, as is protocol when critical infrastructure is vandalized, and local law enforcement cooperated in collecting further leads. Even the national media started poking around. Weather radar sabotaged on eve of tornado warning, read an online headline. My phone rang nonstop with calls from higher-ups, demanding updates. As the ranking official in the region, I fielded questions about how quickly we could restore full capacity and whether the sabotage suggested a broader threat. Meanwhile, the local sheriff's office quietly began interviewing residents. In Danvers Ridge, tongues wagged. Even the staunchest supporters of Marjorie were rattled. A few neighbors told me they'd seen unusual activity near Marjorie's house that prior night. A black SUV was spotted leaving her driveway around midnight. Another neighbor claimed they heard voices behind her property line, then saw flashlight beams heading up the ridge. But rumors alone weren't enough to prove guilt. Midweek, the county commissioners, aware of the fiasco, canceled the hearing that was supposed to discuss relocating the tower. Their official statement called the sabotage shocking and reaffirmed the tower's importance. They pledged full cooperation with NOAA to ensure nothing like this happened again. I saw Marjorie only once in that period, from a distance. She hurried into her driveway, carrying grocery bags, avoiding my gaze. Her usual brazen posture was replaced by something more furtive. I suspected she was lying low, perhaps worried that suspicion might fall on her. But if she had nothing to hide, why act so cagey? A few nights later, we got our first real break. The sheriff's deputies found a partial fingerprint on one of the battered circuit boards, likely from the saboteur who forgot gloves, or perhaps didn't realize the kind of evidence they might leave behind. Preliminary analysis suggested the print belonged to a known associate of Marjorie's, or at least someone who had attended past HOA gatherings. Then they traced a purchase of wire cutters from a local hardware store, caught on camera. The buyer was a middle-aged man who had accompanied Marjorie to prior county meetings. The net was tightening. The worst-case scenario was that Marjorie had orchestrated it, perhaps persuading or paying this person to do the actual deed. If so, that placed her in direct conflict with federal law. Even if she'd never physically touched the tower, conspiracy or incitement to vandalize critical infrastructure carried heavy penalties. My sense of justice bristled. If she did this, she almost caused a tragedy. She must be held accountable. But we needed ironclad proof. The FBI and local authorities methodically built the case. I tried not to let personal anger consume me, focusing instead on ensuring we got the tower fully repaired, and on protecting my own home in case Marjorie retaliated. Despite the swirl of rumors, Marjorie insisted on holding the monthly HOA meeting. Some of us suspected it was her attempt to project confidence, to keep up the facade that she was in control. Typically, fewer than half the residents showed up to these gatherings, but this time the community center was packed. Word of the sabotage had spread, and curiosity ran high. Jillian and I arrived early, taking seats near the middle. Murmurs filled the room. Will she mention the sabotage? Does she know people suspect her? Up front, Marjorie sat flanked by her few loyal board members, posture rigid and expression frosty. Once the meeting started, Marjorie sped through routine items, budget updates, landscaping rules, her voice clipped. Then, a hush fell as she addressed the radar tower fiasco. It's come to my attention, she began in measured tones, that certain irresponsible parties have committed vandalism at the tower. This is, of course, unacceptable. The HOA does not condone illegal actions. She paused, letting her gaze sweep over the crowd. However, we also believe that tower remains a threat to Danvers Ridge's aesthetic and possibly its safety. We demand a thorough investigation into whether its presence is truly beneficial. A burst of frustrated chatter erupted. A tall man in a flannel shirt, Anthony, from a few streets over, stood up and barked. That tower saved our skins during the storm. If we'd lost radar coverage, we might not have had a tornado warning in time. My sister lives in the path of that funnel. She had minutes to spare to find shelter. A woman in the front row chimed in. Marjorie, how can you keep pushing that line after we nearly had a disaster? Are you aware the FBI is involved? Someone from our own neighborhood caused serious sabotage. Marjorie's cheeks colored. I empathize with anyone endangered by the storm, she said, voice tightening. But that doesn't change the fact that we have concerns. And as for the sabotage, the HOA is in no way responsible. A neighbor behind me muttered. Yet she's the one who's been riling everyone up for months. Unable to hold my tongue, I rose. Marjorie, I'm Dr. Ellis. You know me. I've repeatedly offered evidence that the tower is safe and vital. This sabotage, intentionally or not, nearly prevented critical warnings. People could have died. Are you still claiming it's a bigger threat to property values than a tornado is to human life? Her eyes flashed. I never said it was bigger than a tornado threat, Dr. Ellis. But the tower's presence raises legitimate questions. It hums, it's unsightly, and it may well emit harmful waves. We can't ignore local concerns. Several neighbors groaned. Others rolled their eyes. I pressed forward. The sabotage is a federal crime. The radar tower belongs to NOAA. The investigation is ongoing, and let's be absolutely clear. If someone from this HOA was involved, they face severe consequences. A ripple of tension shot through the audience. Marjorie's knuckles whitened around her notes. If you're insinuating that I or the HOA was behind this, I won't entertain such slander. We only pursue lawful routes, petitions and letters. Anyone might have vandalized that tower, perhaps out-of-town hooligans. The meeting deteriorated into arguments. Some demanded Marjorie step down. Others demanded a thorough audit of the HOA's finances to see if funds were used in any shady capacity. She refused, brandishing the bylaws to justify her continued reign. Eventually, she adjourned the meeting abruptly, storming out with her small clique trailing behind. A dark mood hung over the crowd. We all sensed that the confrontation was nearing a breaking point, but no one knew exactly how it would unravel. Behind the scenes, the FBI and local authorities methodically tightened their net. They interviewed each member of the HOA board, cross-referencing statements about who was where on the night of the sabotage. They subpoenaed phone records, discovered suspicious communications, and pieced together a timeline. From the chatter among neighbors, I heard that one of Marjorie's close associates, Martin Poole, had abruptly left Danvers Ridge, claiming family obligations. Some speculated he was fleeing because the law was closing in. The sheriff confirmed that Martin was a person of interest, having purchased the wire cutters and once bragged that the tower would be gone soon enough. A passing remark from a clerk at a local hardware store was all it took to put him on the investigator's radar. I tried to remain patient. My role in the official sense was to supply technical data about the tower and track ongoing repairs. I had to let the justice system do its part. Yet it was hard not to fume, especially when Marjorie paraded around in public, still championing her anti-tower stance as if none of this had happened. One evening, Jillian and I had dinner with a sympathetic neighbor couple. Over plates of homemade lasagna, we vented about the drama. The husband, Stephen, revealed that the sheriff had asked him if he'd heard or seen anything near Marjorie's home that night. Stephen had recalled hearing her mention taking matters into her own hands, but lacked direct proof. From these clues, it sounded like the investigators were building a conspiracy case. If they found that Marjorie had instructed Martin Poole or others to sabotage the tower, they could charge her with incitement or conspiracy to commit a federal offense. The penalty could include prison time, heavy fines, perhaps even the forced sale of her property if she couldn't pay. Each day, the tension in Danvers Ridge ratcheted higher. Marjorie, for her part, tried to rally her loyalists for neighborhood pride events, carefully deflecting any mention of sabotage. But attendance at her gatherings dwindled. The majority saw her as a pariah who'd crossed a line, though few dared confront her openly. Some feared retaliation, fines, nuisance complaints, or worse. She had, after all, used her powers as HOA president to bully neighbors for far less. Then, one muggy afternoon, I saw two black sedans with government plates roll into Marjorie's driveway. A pair of men in suits approached her door. They were in there for nearly an hour. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains, curious. When they finally emerged, they carried a locked briefcase, presumably containing documents or electronics seized under a warrant. That same day, the sheriff's office updated me. The FBI was preparing a final phase of the investigation. They had probable cause to believe Marjorie, Martin Poole, and possibly another accomplice had orchestrated the vandalism. They were simply tying up loose ends, ensuring the case was airtight before making arrests. It wouldn't be long now. The tension snapped 2 days later. It was a bright morning, the sun gleaming on Danvers Ridge's neat lawns. Jillian and I were enjoying a leisurely breakfast when red and blue lights flashed outside. Two sheriff's vehicles rolled up, followed by an unmarked FBI car. The commotion drew neighbors onto their porches. From our window, we watched the officers march to Marjorie's front door. She answered, wearing her usual pressed outfit, but her face drained of color. After a terse exchange, they stepped inside. 10 minutes later, she was let out in handcuffs, escorted by a pair of grim-faced deputies. Murmurs rippled through the watchers, some exclaiming in shock, others with quiet satisfaction. Marjorie's eyes scanned the crowd, her once imperious glare replaced by an ashen, haunted look. A hush fell as the officers guided her into the back of the FBI vehicle. She tried to maintain composure, but her hands trembled. The door slammed shut. The convoy pulled away, leaving the rest of us in stunned silence. The next few days brought a whirlwind of revelations. The sheriff held a press conference, confirming that Marjorie Arlton was arrested on federal charges of conspiracy to commit vandalism against government property. Martin Poole, tracked down in another state, faced similar charges. Evidence indicated they'd planned the sabotage, aiming to force the tower's removal by making it inoperable and dangerously unreliable. Investigators also uncovered that Marjorie had used HOA funds to pay for specialized tools, offering Martin Poole hush money to do the dirty work. In a matter of hours, she went from HOA queen to a disgraced suspect in a felony case. Local news hammered on the irony. A woman who claimed to want safety for the neighborhood had nearly cost the region advanced storm warnings. The sabotage had put everyone at greater risk, ironically fueling the exact danger she purported to protect them from. Neighbors whispered about potential plea bargains, but the weight of the evidence was heavy. Federal sentencing guidelines for sabotaging critical infrastructure, especially with the possibility of endangering lives, were harsh. The rumor mill suggested Marjorie's personal finances were already in disarray, meaning if convicted, fines and restitution could bankrupt her. She might lose her home in Danvers Ridge altogether. Meanwhile, the HOA board scrambled to appoint an interim president who quickly apologized to the entire neighborhood, promising a more collaborative approach. The county commissioners reaffirmed support for the radar tower, now fully repaired and more secure thanks to newly installed cameras and better fencing. As for me, I felt a conflicted relief. While I wanted justice, I hadn't truly relished seeing a neighbor led away in cuffs. But remembering the near miss with the tornado, the risk to thousands of residents, I knew this was necessary. She had to be held accountable for her reckless, life-threatening campaign. Marjorie Arleton's trial commenced 2 months later. By then, the story had garnered regional and even national attention. I was called to testify, explaining the radar tower's critical function and how sabotage could undermine severe weather warnings. The prosecution laid out a damning case: purchase receipts for tools, incriminating text messages between Marjorie and Martin, witness statements linking them to the site that night. An expert also testified on how a mere half-hour delay in tornado detection can lead to catastrophic loss of life. Despite her lawyer's attempts to paint Marjorie as a concerned citizen misled by faulty information about the tower's hazards, the jury was unmoved. She'd conspired to destroy federal equipment. When sentencing day arrived, the judge sternly addressed her. "Ms. Arleton, your actions placed this community in peril. Your misguided obsession with removing the radar tower nearly caused a failure in warning systems during a major storm. This court finds you guilty." He handed down a multi-year prison sentence, plus steep fines to cover the extensive repair costs. With no means to pay, she faced foreclosure on her Danvers Ridge home. Her supporters in the HOA evaporated. Some had testified against her, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal. Others simply vanished, leaving the community in a state of shell-shocked reorganization. An outside legal firm was brought in to restructure the HOA, ensuring stricter checks so no single individual could wield such power again. In the aftermath, a sense of relief swept Danvers Ridge. The sabotage had rattled people, but it also underscored the tower's importance. Many residents who'd been swayed by Marjorie's fear-mongering now embraced the radar station as a protector rather than a threat. A few even wrote letters of thanks to NOAA, praising the technicians who toiled through the storm. I, for one, resumed my normal routine with a quieter heart. Jillian and I enjoyed the neighborhood once more, freed of Marjorie's meddling. The new HOA leadership, friendly and transparent, invited me to present a short talk on how the radar tower works. The event was well attended, and I answered questions about storm detection, safety, and the science behind Doppler radars. The mood was supportive, a far cry from the hostility Marjorie had fomented. And so, life settled into a peaceful cadence at Danvers Ridge. The radar tower stood tall on the ridge, continuing its silent vigil over the region, scanning for storms, providing real-time data to keep us safe. Sometimes, during a calm evening walk, I'd look up at that dome and reflect on how close we came to disaster, both from nature's fury and from one neighbor's reckless obsession. In the end, justice was served. Marjorie was behind bars, her property confiscated to satisfy the massive court-ordered damages. No longer would she dictate what color people could paint their doors or how high they could grow their hedges. The quiet suburban dream Jillian and I had sought was finally restored. For all its complexities, I was grateful that science and reason had triumphed over paranoia. Months later, during a mild autumn, Danvers Ridge felt renewed. Orange and red leaves lined the sidewalks. Neighbors occasionally chatted about the past ordeal, but mainly in a tone of relief, as if collectively exhaling after surviving a tempest. Children rode bikes without fear of a sudden HOA violation, and a small community garden sprouted behind the rec center. An idea once squashed by Marjorie, now flourishing under the new board's open-minded leadership. As for the radar tower, NOAA installed extra security features. Vandalism was unlikely to happen again, but the organization left nothing to chance. Technicians visited more frequently, forging friendly ties with residents who used to eye the tower with suspicion. The relationship between the community and meteorological teams was transformed, once distant, now collaborative. I sometimes think about the raw power of nature, how it humbles us with storms and tornadoes. We rely on science, and each other, for early warnings and mutual protection. Danvers Ridge learned that lesson the hard way. Sabotage and misinformation can be as dangerous as any funnel cloud. Yet, in facing that danger, we emerged closer, more united. The quiet roads and softly lit houses of our neighborhood no longer harbor a hidden menace. Instead, they form a true community, one that respects the dedicated watchers of the skies and the wonders of the technology that helps keep us all safe. No matter what the weather brings in the future, I know we'll be ready. And that knowledge brings a deep, lasting sense of peace.